Welcome to Texas Connections podcast. This is our first episode, and we're excited to be sitting here with Justin Boulay. Um, Before we get started and we jump into our topic of navigating health insurance plans for autism related services, I'm going to touch a little bit about Texas Connections. We're a podcast that is starting to provide resources to families with children with autism or individuals with autism. And also, we are providing CEUs and PDUs for professionals as well. But today's podcast, we have the honor of having Justin Boulay here to talk about insurance plans. So for this podcast, we will not be having the PDUs and CEUs, but those will come in the future. But we're looking forward to sharing this information to jumpstart families that are on this road to supporting their families or their children with autism spectrum disorder. Justin, do you want to go ahead and start off with a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me today, Brittany. It's exciting to be here. I'm again Justin Boulay. I'm the vice president of Hipson Investments, and I was born and raised here in Houston. And I've been in the insurance industry since 2004. But it was really about 2007, 2008 when some of the insurance marketplace started changing a lot. The Affordable Care Act obviously came along, and I started jumping into helping families navigate insurance for autism coverage. And it was kind of the Wild West back then. Brittany, I don't know if you remember all that, but
Yep.
it was a different time. And so what happened was my wife, who I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit today, is a BCBA, was providing services to children. And she came to me once and she's like, it's a really difficult thing. We have all these families who are trying to get services and they have these great insurance plans through their work that cover everything they could possibly need, but it's not covering ABA. It might cover 2 visits a year or something like that. How can we do something different? So it led me down the road of researching and trying to figure out how you can help these families. And since then, I've worked with maybe 2,000, 2,500 families in Texas, navigating that, finding plans that will cover the services they need, whether it's ABA, speech, occupational therapy, et cetera. So a lot's changed in that time, but it's been a really rewarding journey to help those families over the years.
And I think that you're making a good point there because you mentioned your wife, Lene, is a BCBA as well. And Lene actually did some of my initial training as a
That's right.
as a baby tech. So she's wonderful.
Yeah, it's hard to believe we're that old, but it
Yeah,
is true. That's right.
right. But yeah, so even years ago there wasn't funding. Like it
Right.
was that's been the fight that I there's many individuals out there in our field that have fought for insurance to
Right.
cover, and now that it's covering, it's a matter of finding those plans that can help the families.
Yeah, I would say that it's hard to believe now. I mean, if you're new into this journey and you get a little overwhelmed by copays and out of pockets, it's hard to imagine that it's so much better today than it was 15 years ago, when families were coming to me and saying, "We've got to sell our house to pay for 1 year of ABA therapy. There's no insurance coverage," or "My child has a pre-existing condition. No one will give them any services." So we've come a really long way, and it's really hard to believe it used to be that way.
Right. But here we are,
Here we
and
are.
there's ways that we can navigate through it, and so can you tell us a little bit about those plans and how you can help families navigate through that?
Yeah, I would say that when a family first comes to me, they're typically coming because they either have employer-based insurance that they're running into roadblocks with, doesn't cover enough services, limits number of hours, or just doesn't cover any providers, or they have Medicaid, and Medicaid may cover ABA, but they can't find any providers who are in network, or it's too limited, or they just have no insurance and they're just brand new to the entire world of trying to figure that out. And so they're coming to me and they're saying, "Hey, we've got this new diagnosis. We need to get these services. My child needs 20 hours a week of services, and we can't figure out how to get that covered." We jump in and we work with them to try to find an insurance plan that's going to cover the providers they need. And we'll talk about why that step is so important here in a few minutes. But the initial overwhelming part is if a parent jumps on the marketplace, and I'm just going to focus on a Houston zip code here, but if a parent jumps on the marketplace, they're going to find that there are In our zip code, there are 7 carriers with 121 different plans in the Houston area.
Wow.
Gold plans alone, which most families who buy a plan to cover ABA end up purchasing a gold plan, and we'll talk about why. But just gold plans, there are 5 pages of gold plans on the marketplace, and the premium ranges from $300 to $620 a month. So there's just so much information that's out there. There's so many different plans that families just get overwhelmed. And when they first look at them on a page, it's actually pretty hard to tell the differences. So
Right.
most of the numbers on a page are going to look exactly the same, and until you start diving into the actual plans and understanding what they cover, uh, it's hard to make the right decision. So it's a frequent thing that happens where a family picks a plan. They pick the most expensive plan. They think that plan's going to be the best. It's going to cover the most, and then they come back and they think, "Wow, I paid $600 a month, and I still paid $8,000 in out of pocket costs." And I'm hearing about someone else who got it for free. So it's really important to get the plan right up front.
Right. And then also those, each funder has their own authorization requirements. So that's
Right.
something that, on our end, we usually navigate through, so.
When we talk to a family and they say, "Well, what's the difference between these plans? Aren't they all the same?" And particularly if you're on one of those Facebook groups, I love the Facebook groups. The Texas Autism Insurance Group is a huge resource for families, connects them to a lot of people, and they give a lot of great advice. And one of the things they say on the Facebook group is, if you're not an insurance expert, don't give insurance advice. And the reason for that is a frequent comment that might get made is, "Well, all insurance plans in Texas cover ABA. We have a Texas mandate to cover ABA." And that is technically true. We do have a mandate in the state of Texas that insurance plans that are regulated by the state must cover ABA. But how they cover, who they cover, the roadblocks to coverage are very different
Right.
between plans. And so, as you know, as a provider, you have a family who comes to you and they say, "Hey, I just bought this plan from carrier X." We won't give any
Names.
endorsements today, but they come with you with this plan and they say, "This is the plan I bought. I called a random person. They told me this is the best plan in Texas." Turns out there are no ABA providers that are in that network,
Network. Right.
or if there are, it's not the ones they want.
Right.
So step one, most important thing is, we don't ask the question, "Does a plan cover ABA?" That is the wrong question to ask. If you're on the marketplace, the plan covers ABA. It absolutely covers it. The first question though is, does it cover ABA providers?
Right.
Does it cover the providers you need? And then you have to move to, well, what's the difference between that coverage? So any BCBA who's ever dealt with insurance, I don't want to say you have favorites when it comes to insurance companies, but
Maybe.
any BCBA who's dealt with insurance has had to have the fight of, all right, you're 6, so if you take this insurance plan, you're going to get this many hours, but if you switch to this insurance plan, you're going to get this many. Oh gosh, you're turning 10 and you've had good progress, so we know this insurance company is going to cut your hours,
Right.
right? So understanding how those plans will cover your child services
Right.
is so critical. I can't tell you how many families we talk to throughout the year that the reason they're calling is, my 10-year-old just got reduced. They're telling me they'll only give me one visit a week now, something like that. I know you're familiar with
Well, that's one thing. I love the fight. So I love going to peer reviews. So I love challenges. So I'm always, those are things that, if they're tough insurance companies, and I like the challenge because I'm like, I can't wait to go to peer review. I got my stuff. I'm ready.
Yeah, and I don't want to scare
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So if an insurance company is trying to cut your hours, that's not a hard stop.
Right.
So one thing that I think families should understand is, if they get that letter from an insurance company that says, "We're not covering this many hours," or "We're reducing hours," or "We won't authorize this service," they have options still. So a family can appeal those decisions. I know you've been through many of those before.
Right.
And I think too often families just get that letter and they just move on. And they go,
Right.
"Oh, I guess that means my child's not going to get ABA, or they can't get a service in school." But
Right.
if you work with a provider who will work with you, you can absolutely challenge those decisions. And if it's
Right.
necessary, there's no reason not to challenge those
Right.
decisions.
And that's one thing, we kinda look at their treatment plan as their transition plan. So a lot of their goals are correlated with transitioning to whatever environment when we meet with the parents on get-go. So we're like, "Okay, what are your expectations? Where are you wanting to go? How can we help you, your kid reach these goals in this natural environment?" And then we write the goals, and so that kind of helps us navigate through those challenges because the goals are the transition plan in a sense, and until they master those out, we're looking at like, "Okay, well, this is where we have to be for them to learn in this environment. This is where we have to be for them to be able to
Right.
navigate." And that usually helps a little bit, and whenever we're in peer review, they're understanding about that, because we're actually trying to push them out rather than keep them, you
Right, and
know?
I think that, you know, obviously I know you very well, but, there's so many ABA providers in the state, but I would encourage any family that when you are evaluating ABA providers, that is a huge piece of it, particularly as your kiddos get a little older.
Right,
10 is kind of a magic number, right? As they approach 10, move past 10, that's when the insurance companies start to like to say, they don't need as many services now. We need to start reducing them. And that's not a hard decision. So when you're working with the provider, you really want a provider that's going to partner with you and help
right,
you navigate those things. So when I talk to a family up front, I'm telling them, yes, this plan covers services. Yes, it covers this provider. Here's what we tend to see. This carrier might give you this many hours or something like that. But all of those decisions ultimately are going to be based on medical necessity,
right,
right? So I get asked all the time, well, if I take this plan, will I get 40 hours a week? Okay. I can't tell you that, right?
right,
One, I'm not a BCBA, I'm not a doctor. Two, the only people who can make that decision are going to be the insurance company, and they're going to do it in coordination with the provider. If you're working with a provider who just doesn't want to help you with insurance, that's going to make it a lot more difficult for you. So we try to tell families before you pick a plan, you really want to talk to your providers. Your
right,
providers are the most experienced. They know, this insurance company that's going to work with these children at these ages, et cetera. So um, come in with a little bit of information before we make a plan, because once you make a decision on a plan, you're stuck for a year. So we
right.
want to get it right that first time.
And I think it's also important for, like, families to also understand when they pick those plans, like, since ABA is a service that typically will be delivered every day, they're
Right.
most likely gonna meet their deductible with the ABA provider. It's not like a dentist appointment that you go
Right.
once every 6 months. And then also that, funders have the right to hold on to claims for 90 days, so you may not get a bill
Right.
for a service that was in January until, like, March, April.
Right.
And that's kind of out of the provider's control, you
Right.
know what I mean? So, those are all things that are, that we've kind of encountered that we try to communicate to families on the get-go, like, "You're most likely gonna meet this deductible with us,
Right.
but, because we're servicing you every single day." So, if you go get services elsewhere, like go to the doctor, that may impede it a little bit,
Yep.
but not significantly when you're looking at the cost of ABA services.
Yeah, and I think when you look at plans, we had an experience earlier this year, specifically kind of to what you're talking about, where a family was looking at a plan. They brought in someone and they said, "Why would we pick, this?" I don't want to mention any specific plans today, but why would you pick this gold plan that's costing $380 a month when there's this bronze plan that's available for $200 a month? Shouldn't we just take the cheapest plan? We're going to meet our deductible. Each individual family is going to be a different situation. So there are gold plans that will cover ABA under a daily copay, and some of them will cover it under $20. So what we try to do is we work with the family and we say, let's look at your total cost exposure. You're going to have a premium, that's your fixed cost. We know exactly what that's going to cost you over 12 months. Are you using other coverage? Do you have Medicaid? Are you just using this plan to get ABA services? If you are, then a copay a day is going to ultimately save you money over the year. But if you're getting ABA, speech, OT, and this is your main medical plan, it's going to cover all your medical services, then the odds are you're going to meet your plans out of pocket. So
Right,
you really want to know what those cost exposures are going to be. So this family we were looking at, for them, a bronze plan was going to cost them well over $12,000 a year because they were going to max out those benefits.
right,
Whereas they went with the gold plan, yes, it's costing them a little bit more each month, but their total cost exposure ended up being closer to $8,000 a year. So you save $4,000 by actually spending more money. But sometimes the reverse is true. So it's really important that we have all those details up front and we evaluate the total cost structure.
Right, and that makes sense because sometimes it may look cheaper, but, like, when you break it down like that, it doesn't always end up being that way.
Right. And of course, I'm just going to use that moment to just lead us right into the most confusing aspect of this is the dual coverage situation.
Okay.
So I would say, again, each year we probably work with I'm going to say maybe around 100 new families every open enrollment. So those will be people who are new to us. We have no history with them, and they have new coverage they're seeking. Of those, I think it's probably 80% of all of our clients are going to have some other coverage in addition to a marketplace plan. So if you're out there and you're thinking, well, yes, I need something new, but I have this, I have Medicaid, I have an employer plan, so this isn't going to apply to me. Again, 80% of our clients end up with a dual coverage situation, whether that's another employer plan plus an individual plan, or they have Medicaid and they need an employer plan. So I'll use it to say, what's the number one question that leads to confusion? And that is, can I have an individual plan that I'm using to cover ABA therapy if I also have Medicaid or an employer plan? If you call the marketplace, which I love the marketplace, the people there are great people. I don't mean this to attack them, but if you call the marketplace and ask them that, 9 times out of 10, they're going to tell you, no, you cannot have a marketplace plan if you have any other coverage. I can't tell you how many families I talk to who say that, and I have to really convince them that's not true. You absolutely
Wow.
can have a marketplace plan with other coverage. What you can't have is a tax credit. So if you need a tax credit to reduce the premium, you can't qualify for that if you have other insurance. But if
That's
you have other insurance, you can still get the plan. You're just going to pay full pricing. And it's really important to know that. So what happens? Well, you have to coordinate those plans. The plans have to know about each other. We tell both plans, providers can submit to both. They will coordinate coverage. Why is that important? Well, if you have Medicaid, a lot of families, a lot of children on the autism spectrum are going to get Medicaid coverage, and it may cover all of your speech. It may cover all of your OT. It may cover Texas Children's Hospital. It may cover your neurologist, your pediatric neurologist, but it might not cover your ABA. So you come and you get an additional individual plan, and that's going to step in and cover your ABA, and you're going to use Medicaid to pay for everything else. That decision may mean the gold plan makes the most sense because you've got Medicaid paying for everything else.
okay, I just wanna clarify because this is new information to me. This
Okay.
is good information, and I think it's important that you're pointing this out. So families can have Medicaid and then also have a marketplace plan to cover ABA services.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Now, some specific plans will have a clause that says you can't have our plan if you have someone else. It's called coordination of coverage. So if the plan says we do not coordinate coverage, then you could run into issues. But for most plans, I would say it's close to 99% of plans now, they're going to have the uniform coordination language. And that language is just going to say whichever plan the member or the child is the primary member on, that plan will be primary. If it's Medicaid in an individual plan, then they'll coordinate together and pay those claims. So most of our families who are using Medicaid are using Medicaid to pay for speech, occupational therapy, and medical services, and ABA is being covered under their individual plan.
Understood. Okay, that's good information because I didn't realize that they could have both.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's super important, and it's interesting that it's being communicated the opposite.
Well, it's confusing, and the reason it's confusing to the marketplace people is they're used to talking about subsidies. They're used to talking about tax credits, and so they're right when they say you can't have those tax credited plans, but you can still get those plans direct off the market. So again, 80% of our families are using multiple coverages.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's we're gonna take a note of that. A lot of this information we're taking notes. I forgot to mention earlier that if you email TexCon TEXCONN at sclckd.com, we can send this information to you because I think that this is all beneficial, and so that way the parents have that as well.
Yep.
Is there anything else you want to touch on?
Yeah, so I think there's a few other things that I think families run into that we try to alleviate ahead of time. So again, number one is know who your provider is in network with. I mean, it's the biggest problem that families have with their insurance plans is getting plans that providers just don't accept. So
Right.
if you're on the marketplace and you see a really cheap plan, I know in our mind we're thinking insurance. You know, who's going to be my cheapest? I'm shopping for my homeowner's insurance right now, and I'm just like, will anybody save me a dollar, please?
Right.
But when you're working with a plan that you need to cover these services, you really don't want to focus on which plan is the cheapest. You really need to know, is this plan going to work with my provider? Whether that means you're working with us as a broker, you're working with another broker that you trust, or you're working with a provider who gets, really into the details with you and talks to it about it. Just make sure you know
Right.
what this plan covers, who it covers, what happens as my child gets older. And then, of course, therapy limits. So if you have an employer plan, a huge problem that we still have, although it is a lot better now, and I know you know about this, Brittany, is if you'd have looked even 5 years ago, if you worked for a major company, you might have had a plan that covered, man, if I have cancer, it's going to cover everything. If I, get a major medical condition, it's going to cover everything. It's great. But if my child has autism, they're going to cover 20 visits a year, or they might say, we'll pay $25,000 a year, which seems like a really big number.
But
But
yeah.
when you're going somewhere for 8 hours a
Yeah.
day, $25,000 runs out fast. So if you're in that situation still, then you can still explore an individual plan. So don't accept just those limitations. But then I would also take that and direct you back to, again, that Texas Autism Insurance Group on Facebook. It's an awesome resource. There's a lot of really great people on there who have just helped so many families over the years. And one of the tools they actually have is an employer communication tool that will help you explain some of the mental health parity acts, Texas laws, et cetera, and how that applies to employers, because most employers probably should be covering ABA services. So if you're
Right.
in one of those groups that's not, then there might be some ways you can help communicate that to your employer to try to make that change. But in the meantime, you can still get an individual plan to get those gaps filled.
And I think another point to kind of, bring up is, like, when you're looking before you look for, obviously an insurance plan, the majority of ABA services does require a medical diagnosis of
Right.
autism. So, when you're looking at, starting services, when you're touring other centers and that kind of thing, to keep that in mind, because that's kind of it's difficult. Well, they
Yeah.
don't in Texas anyhow. In Texas, you have to have that medical
Yeah,
diagnosis,
absolutely.
and it does have to be reevaluated every 2 years.
Yep.
So that's another important factor. We always tell families to go ahead and get on those lists,
Yep.
to go ahead and schedule their reeval, whenever they leave that day and they get the first one, like, just to make
Yeah.
sure that all that's on track.
Yeah. And I would say that just another one is Medicaid access. Again, Texas is a unique state when it comes to Medicaid and what Medicaid's covering, but Medicaid can still be a really important tool for families. So even if you're in a situation where you need to get those individual plans or keep your employer plan or whatever situation it is to get coverage for ABA, don't skip the Medicaid process. So
Right.
I know a lot of families, they don't want to mess with the Medicaid situation because they're trying to deal with their private insurance, but at some point Medicaid is just a huge asset to families. Even if it's not going to cover your ABA, you can work around that, but it can take a long time to do the to do the Medicaid process. So the sooner you start that, the better. So I would just again, I keep pointing back to it. Texas Autism Insurance Group. There are some Medicaid specialists in that group as well. So if you need help with that, there are people who will give you guidance on that. But just don't wait until they're 18 and then you're like, hey, how do we figure out this Medicaid thing? Because you're going to miss out on a lot of services there as well.
And, it's good that you're pointing out the insurance group, as a resource to get that information. Is there a lot of people that are, like, answering questions in there that are actually experts? I always kinda worry with social media, sometimes there's misinformation,
Social media is the best thing to happen to the world, and it's also the
The
worst
worst,
thing
you're right.
that's happened
It's
to
a
the world.
double-edged sword
It
for
is a
sure.
huge double-edged sword, and I would say there are definitely experts in that group, who can help you, but like any social media group, you just have to be careful. So,
Right.
and keep in mind people's personal experiences. So, I'll give you an example that we're working with a small business who's changing insurance companies, and one of them said, "Well, I don't want to switch to this insurance company because it's the worst insurance company I've ever worked with in the world, and they'll never cover anything for my child." And I said, "What? Well, why would you feel that way?" And they said, "Well, 5 years ago, I went through all these hoops and it was terrible, and they didn't cover it." So just like any Amazon review,
Right.
the people who are going to be the loudest tend to be people who've had a bad experience. So if you are seeing a post that tells you, "Well, don't worry about this plan because it will not cover anything," don't take that as gospel.
Right.
So understand that people have frustrations because of their own real experiences, but the
Right.
plan can be different for everybody. That's why I led off with the right plan is different for every child. Plan A may work for this child, but it may not work for yours. Was their child 14? Because if their child was 14, a plan that's working better for anybody in the state of Texas is actually going to work pretty bad for them. So
Different variables for sure
absolutely. So just don't take those things, but you can still get a lot of good nuggets, absolutely, from that group.
from the
Hmm.
group. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, is there anything else that you want to kind of touch on to make sure that we are?
We
Yep.
Okay. So last thing from me is qualifying events. So
Okay.
the worst thing in the year is getting those calls from people who say, uh, "We we have insurance, but it's not covering what we need. How do we get a new policy?" And we work with a lot of centers around the state, and they send families to us throughout the year who are suddenly in the situation. And in your mind, you think, okay, well, they tell me I can get a new plan or change plans if I have a qualifying life event. And my child just got diagnosed with autism. That seems like a really big
Really.
life event,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
That is not a qualifying event for insurance purposes. So
Really.
that's right. So the only qualifying events mid-year are typically ones that mean you lost some other sort of coverage. So your employer changed plans in the middle of the year. You moved from Alabama to Texas, and now your Alabama plan is no longer eligible. You got divorced, you got married, you had a baby. Something that impacts your actual eligibility for coverage is all that we can use for qualifying events. So a lot of families that come to us during the year get really frustrated because they can't get a new plan. So I would again say that's why, one, we want to get the plan right the first time.
Right.
Don't call, random brokers who are trying to sell you the cheapest plan. I just can't encourage you enough to work with someone who actually understands autism and what's going to be covered under the plan. Two, work during open enrollment. So open enrollment starts on November 1st. It runs through January 15th. Every year, check your plan. Even
Mhm.
if you have a plan that's been working for the last 5 years, check it because those renewal processes can be different for everybody. And then during the year, if you have a qualifying event, that's when you make a change. And then the last part of that is a lot of families have an avenue available to them that they're not aware of, and that is a small business plan. So in the state of Texas, we do have guaranteed issue small business insurance plans that are available, and they're available to two-person groups, and that can include a husband and wife. So if you're a mom and dad, you've got a child on the spectrum, you need coverage, you can't get a coverage that's going to work. You work with a provider who can't use the individual plan that's available in your zip code. But this is a real example. Mom sells candles on eBay.
There
Okay.
we go.
That's an LLC. We're making money. Let's hire dad as, the office manager, the accountant, whatever.
Yeah.
Now we've got a two-person company and we can go and start a guarantee issue plan. No pre-existing limitations, PPO coverage. Again, on the marketplace, everything's an HMO. So small business plans are the only way to get a PPO plan, and more people have that available to them than realize.
Wow. I mean, it's something to think about if there's no other options, you know what I mean? And you're already, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
slinging candles on Amazon.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
But
eBay. Yeah,
eBay,
yeah.
yeah. Oops. But yeah, so I guess we're kind of wrapping up now. We're at our time, but once again, I want to thank Justin for coming out and sharing information about these insurance plans to kind of help parents navigate through all of the things that come with getting a newly diagnosed child. That we want to make sure that we're providing information to help them through all that. Um, is there anything?
I would just say easiest way to reach me is email. So my email is really easy, jb@hipson.com. I know it'll be on the resources page as well. I respond to emails as quickly as I can, but that is the fastest way to reach me. I don't charge any fees to talk to people. I love helping people, and I love helping families. I think it's a way to serve. So reach out if you need help.
Justin also does navigate through other investment plans too, right? So
Right.
there's
So
some other things you can
absolutely. We're
help
happy to
with.
talk about life insurance, long-term care planning. We do estate planning, special needs planning. So we can help you through more than just the coverage for your initial needs. We'll help you with those long-term needs as well.
And I think that's important to kind of mention as well. Those special need plans is planning for the future. I think that starts
I think
upon the diagnosis.
it's probably the weakest part of support for families is and I get it. You've got this new diagnosis, it's going to take over, and you're really focused on day to day, right?
Right.
How do we tackle this? But special needs planning and long-term planning is about what's going to happen over the next 30 years, the next 40 years. What is your child going to need when they're 50?
Right.
What are they going to do when you're not here? Are they going to be able to work? Are they going to have a career? Are you going to need to support them beyond your career earning potential? And those are plans that the earlier you make those plans, the cheaper it is,
Right.
and the more effective it'll be long term.
And sometimes it's hard to bring up those think about questions, with families, but it is definitely something that we have to be looking forward to. I even think that our field could do a better job of preparing for adulthood just because we don't have a lot of help out there, vocational programs and work programs established for our kids. And I'm concerned about our
Yeah,
future a little bit.
I would say even just today, you've heard me talk so much about children,
Right.
and of course, I have a heart for kids. Most of the families who come to me, they're looking for a child. They need help with a child, but those children grow up,
Right.
and
Quickly, right?
they need support.
Like ours did.
I know.
Our kids are
I watched my daughter get ready for cheer today, and I was just like, man, I can't believe how old my daughter is. But um,
no,
they grow up. They grow up quickly, and the services that you're worried about getting coverage for today are not going to be the services they need for the
it's not gonna look
majority
the
of their
same.
life,
Yep.
right? So right now, the most important thing is how do we get services? How do we take care of our child? How do we get our child prepared? But for most of their life, they won't be a child.
Right.
They're going to be an adult. And the reality is, sadly, we won't be there for a lot of our children's lives. They will outlive us, hopefully,
Right.
and they will need support. And so that's an important part of planning that just gets left. It just
Right.
gets ignored because it's not comfortable. But again, the earlier you do that planning, the cheaper it is and the more effective it is.
And I think, I know we got to wrap it up, but one thing I want to point out is like that the services that you're offering at Hips and Benefits are not only focusing on for the children now, but also for their future.
Correct.
And I think that that's what we have to think about when we're navigating through an autism diagnosis is what do I need now and what do I need to prepare for the future for my
Right.
child? Because what you're doing now is great because what we know about the research and, early intensive behavioral intervention is like teaching those skills to help navigate the world around them. But when they get to an age to where like they may need more assistance and planning that way and helping families navigate through those challenges is super important. So
Right.
I think that it's good that we touched on this
Yep.
towards the end.
Absolutely.
So but I guess we're going to close it out. So I appreciate everyone that is watching and tuning in to us. And I appreciate Justin coming in and sharing the good news about how hips and investments can definitely help your children now and later as adults, I guess, not no longer children.
That's right.
But once again, you're welcome to email TextCon for further information and resources based on the information communicated in this podcast. It'll also be posted on our link as well. This will also be available on Apple Podcast.
Awesome. Thank you,
So
Brittany.
thank you, Justin.